Thanks for tuning in. Our last one before the application deadline. The audio. Just the chat box right now. Okay, great. We're going to get started. So congratulations to each of you watching on receiving a nomination to Broadcom Masters. Being named one of the top 10% of middle school students competing in science fair across the country is a huge honor. We are glad you have taken the next step in the Broadcom Masters process by opening your application. I'm Raver Almadurai, the Program Manager for Broadcom Masters, and I'm here with my colleague, Hunter Hart. Our team at the Society is responsible for the Broadcom Masters program. You've probably received many emails from us this spring, and we'll receive more over the next few days. We are here to help you every step of the way of this application process. This session is being recorded so that other students who cannot join us today can also hear this information. As you are likely aware, the application is due this Wednesday, June 12th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. That's just a few days away, but definitely enough time to complete the application. Hundreds of students open and submit their applications on the deadline day each year. We don't encourage this, but we share this information to let you know that it's possible and that you are already ahead of the game. Today, we're doing a brief overview of the Broadcom Masters program in case you are not yet aware of the exciting opportunities that lie ahead when you submit your application. Then we'll go through a few frequently asked questions and a quick review of each section of the application. Then we'll spend the majority of our time today answering your questions. You can ask questions throughout the webinar in the chat box on the left of the screen.
The Broadcom Science is the premier national science fair-based competition for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students. A student must place within the top 10% in a society-affiliated science fair. You have already completed this step. Nominated students are invited to apply to the national competition online. As you know, the application is due on Wednesday. Broadcom Masters is a program of the Society for Science and the Public, which is the organization that Raven and I work for. The Society for Science and the Public is a nonprofit dedicated to public engagement in the scientific community. The Society for Science and the Public runs 3 distinguished science competitions: the International Science and Engineering Fair for high school students, the Regeneron Science Talent Search for high school seniors, and the Broadcom Masters. The Broadcom Masters competition is made possible by our friends and sponsor, the Broadcom Foundation. The Broadcom Foundation empowers young people to be STEM literate, critical thinkers, and college and career ready by creating multiple pathways and equitable access to achieve the 21st century skills they need to succeed as engineers, scientists, and innovators of the future.
So, how do you become a Broadcom Masters finalist? Each of you have already done steps 1 through 3. So after you submit your application by the deadline, over the summer, all entries will be read by evaluators and judges. The top 300 masters are selected, and from this pool, the 30 finalists are selected and invited to participate in finals week in DC. If you submit your application by the deadline, not only will you be in the running for a spot as a top 300 master or a top 30 finalist, but you also receive a prize package in the mail in a few weeks. This package will include a t-shirt, bumper sticker, and a book of invention and innovation stories from Science News magazine, courtesy of the Lemelson Foundation. We hope you wear your t-shirt proudly. You definitely earned it. You will also join our alumni network, which often gathers alumni together in cities for networking opportunities, panels, and more.
This year, which includes a backpack, subscription to Wolfram Mathematica, an invention journal from the Lemelson Foundation, and more. Finalists will be announced the 5th to the 30th. Each finalist receives an all-expenses-paid trip to compete in Finals Week in DC. Prizes include iPads, $500 per finalist, STEM summer camp funds, and several top awards. The Finals Week experience, where the top 30 gather, is memorable, fun, and life-changing. The competitive events of Finals Week are different from many other science competitions.
I hear you guys talking on the chat that the audio is still not clear. So just give me 1 second and we're going to try to fix it.
So we're going to continue on. Just continue sending us messages in the chat if you can't hear. So all finalists do present their research projects to the judges, just like a typical science fair. However, that counts for only a fraction of their final score for the week, since the project has already carried them through many rounds of this competition. The rest of the score comes from the hands-on team challenges. We divide the 30 finalists into teams, and they spend 2 days solving problems using STEM. Some examples include a challenge where finalists had to determine what caused a fictional zombie outbreak and how fast it would spread. Judges observe the teams in these challenges, which cover all fields of STEM, to decide on the winners.
Okay, so now we're going to go over a few frequently asked questions that you might encounter while working on your application. So first, when must we submit our application? As you know by now, the application is due this Wednesday, June 12th at 8 p.m. If you submit before June 12th, you can always go back into your application and make edits, but be sure you hit submit again. If you have a team project, each team member must submit separate applications and answer each question individually.
When you create an account, you will need to provide a fair password and username that you should have received on the back of your nominee packet. Each fair password is unique to the fair you participated in. If you entered the wrong fair password when opening your application, a message will pop up that says you entered an invalid fair password. If you see this, you will need to email us and tell us the name of the fair that nominated you and your city and state.
I was nominated by more than one fair. What should I do? So if you were nominated by more than one fair, say your regional fair and your state fair, just choose one fair password to use. It doesn't matter which. You will be asked later in part 1 if you were nominated by more than one fair. Our judges don't see this data, but it helps with their tracking data and gives fairs credit for their nominations. So even if you were nominated by more than one fair, no judges or evaluators will see this data and everyone is on an even playing field.
In part 1 of the application, you are asked to select your school from a drop-down menu. If your school is not listed, email us with the name of your school and full address. We'll verify this information and send you an email to confirm once it has been added.
So if you have trouble uploading forms, the first thing you need to do is make sure your uploads are in PDF form. This is the only file type our system will accept. So the first thing you need to do is convert your files into a PDF. And you can do this by going to the website listed in the application or find one online. You can Google convert to PDF, and many websites will come up that can help you with this conversion. But make sure to ask a parent or teacher for help. If you have a hard copy of one of your forms, for example, if you printed out the parent permission form and a parent signed it, you can scan and upload this file as a PDF. If you don't have a scanner, you can also take a picture of your form and then convert it into a PDF to upload it into our system. Okay, so we just went over a few frequently asked questions, and now we're going to take a look at the actual application. And I'm just going to point out some things step by step, since I'm sure many of you have questions on each specific section. So hold on as we switch our screens. Okay, so now you should be able to see that we are in a test account of Porky Pig. And so the first part of the application screen just kind of gives you a rundown of Broadcom Masters and a few steps about how to complete the application. So over here, you'll see that there's a download application button. We definitely recommend downloading the application once you hit submit so that you have a record of the application you used. So as you all know, there are a few different sections that you have to complete before you can submit the application. So the first, the designated adult's email address. So if you, everyone should have a designated adult. If you're using your parent's email address, you don't need to add a new email address. But if you are using your own personal email address, you can click Edit View. And then you'll be able to add a new member to this section. Designated adults also receive all the emails that we are sending out through Fluid Review, so they'll get a copy of any of the communications that we're sending. Next, the formal registration. So this section kind of goes over just basic demographic information. It asks for, oh, we're actually on page 2, so I'm going to go back and say, okay, so now we're on page 1, but that brings up a good point that a lot of these sections have more than one page. So you want to make sure that you're always scrolling down all the way to the bottom to see if you need to save and continue to the next page. So like I mentioned, this section is basic demographic information. It's going to ask for your name, date of birth, contact information. This section right here that asks for your name for public materials, if you make it to the top 300 or the top 30 finalists, we'll be using your name in a lot of our print materials and on our website. So you might want to use a different name than what you're actually applying with. Say you apply with a nickname or something, or you don't have a middle name, but you want to include the middle initial on print materials. This is where you want to write exactly how your name should appear on all of our websites and other things. For patents and languages, I just want to point out also that this information is just used by our communications team. Again, if you make it on to the top 300 or top 30 for media purposes and things like that. but none of this information is seen by any of our judges. It's only used for internal purposes and when you make it on further. So none of this information affects your judging or evaluation at all. So part 2, this is the project information section, probably the section that a lot of you are most excited to write about and probably feel the most confident on. So I just want to, I'm not going to go over each individual question here, but I want to note that this is designed to feel like a judging interview. So if it helps, if you're feeling like you don't exactly know how to start writing or putting your thoughts down on paper, it might help to answer the questions out loud, like you would have done at your local science fair, and then see what comes out and then write down those answers. So one note about selecting a category for your project. So the advice that we give, since some of these categories might not be the same as what you had at your local science fair, try to look at this list and think about what type of scientist or educator or engineer would best understand your project. We don't have any kind of quotients that we need to fill in terms of how, we need a certain number of animal science projects at the end of the day. So that this category question is really just to make sure that the right scientists, the right professionals are looking through your application, and those are going to be the people who understand it the best. So your project title, another quick note here, whatever you write here in this box for your project title is going to be the title that we use throughout the rest of the Broadcom Masters process if you make it to the top 300 or top 30 finalists. So just make sure it's something that you really want to use. I'm going to go back now. And if you have any more specific questions about each individual section, I definitely recommend going to the video resources tab on the home page. And we have section by section walkthroughs of the application. So your questions are most likely going to be answered there. So for the essay questions, so this section gives you a little bit more freedom to kind of tell us about yourself and your thoughts about STEM and as they relate to your project and in general. So there are 3 different questions, sections of questions that we want to hear about. The first is about my project. Then we have about me and solving a problem. So for each of these, you just need to select one of the options and then give us your answer in the text box. So if you have, for example, and for the about my project, if you already wrote an abstract for your science fair, then you can just copy and paste that if it's 250 words or less, right in here and you will be good to go. One note about the word counts. So you would have noticed that all of our kind of long text answers do have word limits on them. We want you to practice being concise with your answers. So that's why we enforce word limits, but you also don't have to meet the whole word limit. Say you have 250 words here to tell us about your project. It's okay if you don't use all 250 of those words. So the next section, personal interests. The judges do see this section, but it just gives them a little bit more background as to who you are as a student, as a person. So you just need to tell us about your extracurricular activities. For the question about STEM careers, I know a lot of you might not know this answer yet, and that's totally okay. Just go through the list and see if anything kind of pops out to you. Oops. Science fair paperwork. I know some of you probably have a lot of questions about this section. For more specific questions, definitely email us at masters@societyforscience.org, and we'll be able to answer your specific question about the science fair paperwork you might need for your project. But this wizard is kind of designed to help make that process a little bit easier. So for the first part, we just want you to check where you conducted your lab work. And then if you used any of the following subjects or things in your research, you want to click that here. If you select none of the above, then you aren't required to submit any science fair paperwork. However, if you submit that you worked with vertebrate animals, it's going to ask you to upload science fair paperwork here. Sometimes you might have already submitted your science fair paperwork to your fair and you didn't get a copy. So if that's your case, then what you can do instead is have an adult who supervised your work write a letter describing what kind of prior approvals you got for your research and any safety measures that you followed. We basically want to make sure that you're conducting your project safely. But like I said, for more specific questions, definitely email us and we will help you out. So the visual aid, we do get a lot of questions about this. Basically, we want to see any kind of, since this application is online and we don't get to see your project board, this is a chance to show any figures or data tables or charts that you think are important to your research and that you want the evaluators and judges to see when they read about your application. We don't want anyone to just put the whole image of their science fair project on this visual aid. It should basically be able to be read in an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper without being able to zoom in or anything like that. So you want to choose what graphs and things are most pertinent to your project. If you have some text, like say you did a math-based project or a computer coding project and you want to include your code, that text is fine to include. But we don't want like extra text or extra paragraph answers from the other sections of the application, for example. Another helpful tip for the visual aid, if you, for example, label your charts or pictures, you can refer to them in your application itself in the project information section. So you can say, if you're talking about your methodology and you want to say, see image 2 in the visual aid, that's a great way to let the evaluators know that you have something that connects to that particular part of the application. For uploading the parent permission form, it's pretty straightforward. Like we already kind of talked about how to convert your files into PDFs. So if you have any issues with that, definitely let us know. And then once all of these things are complete, you can go ahead and submit your application, and then you are all done. One other quick note, if you have science fair paperwork that you've uploaded, but it's not showing up in this section, once you upload it here, for example, you'll see it, your file name should show up here. You might not be able to see the actual document from this section, but what you can do instead is go back to the home screen and download the entire application, and then you'll be able to see any science fair paperwork that you uploaded. Okay, so that kind of concludes walking through the application. Like I mentioned before, we do have a lot more video resources in this tab and on our YouTube page. So definitely check those out if you have things that weren't covered in this overview. And now we're going to take a couple of minutes to go through the chat box and pick out some questions to start answering. Okay, so I see that some people have asked about how would you know if there are typos in your application? And so one thing that we recommend is copying and pasting your answers into a Word document so that you can see if there are any typos, and then you can copy and paste those once you corrected it back into the application. So that's a helpful tip. There's another question that we received about team members. So all teams do need to submit individual applications. And another question that kind of goes along with that is that if you are part of a team and your whole team gets nominated, but say one of your team members does not wish to apply, you can still apply without the rest of your team members. It does not affect your application or the evaluation of your application at all. We got a couple questions about PDF uploading difficulties and errors. So if you have any of those and you kind of work through all the options we already gave you, definitely email us at masters@societyforscience.org, and we will help upload that into your application. So I think we received a question about the parent permission forms. We do need a parent or guardian to sign those forms. It can be a physical signature, and you can take a picture and upload that. It can be a digital signature through Adobe if your parents have that, but we do need a signed document from a parent or guardian. Captions can, we received another question about the visual aid and captions in the visual aid. Yes, you can definitely include captions in your visual aid. That's not an issue. Again, we basically are saying that we don't want large chunks of text. So like no extra big paragraphs that are responses to any part of your application. And again, we don't want to see tiny images of like trying to get all 20 or how many ever graphs and things like that you have on the application. We just want to see what you think are the most valuable pieces of visuals from your project. So if you did not complete science fair paperwork, we received a question about that. And our science fair wizard kind of indicates that you should have. Email us and we can help you determine whether or not you needed that. Like I said, it's also an option to submit a letter from a fair director or teacher or an adult that helped you and supervised you through your research to let us know what kind of safety measures and things you did before working on your project. So we got a question about the turnaround time on adding new schools to our drop-down menu. We are working on those throughout this weekend, and we'll be checking email very frequently for the next 3 days. So we will let you know with the reply back email as soon as that has been added to the list from our end, and you should be good to go. So we got a specific question about question 2 of part 3. So I'm going to navigate over there in 1 second. Okay, so I believe this question was about the About Me section. If you could instantly download one skill like Neo does in The Matrix with Kung Fu, what would you choose? What would it help you accomplish? So this might be, some of you might not be familiar with this movie, but basically the character is able to download a skill and instantly learn it. So if you had that ability, what skill would you choose to instantly have, and what might it help you accomplish? For example, you could choose something sports related, like in this in this example, it does not have to be. It could be maybe the skill of instantly knowing how to computer program, or something along, or really any kind of skill that you think is valuable and would help you accomplish something. If you're not feeling comfortable with that question, you can always choose the second option as well. We only need you to choose one option from this section. Okay, so we got a question about what distinguishes a finalist from a top 300 masters. So just to go over the process one more time, after you all submit your applications, you are all considered entrants to the Broadcom Masters competition, and you are all alumni. So from there, evaluators and judges will review the applications, and in September, we announce the top 300 masters. So the top 300 is kind of like the semifinalist stage of the competition. So from the top 300, we choose 30, or not we, but the judges, myself, Hunter, everyone at the society does not have any role in deciding who moves on at each stage of the competition. But from the top 300, the judges select 30 finalists to then come to DC in October to compete in finals week. And so this is an all expenses paid trip for you and one parent or guardian. And after finals week, that is when we choose, the judges choose the top 4 award winners. And really, there's a lot of cool prizes that you can get once you get to the top 300 stage, or sorry, the top 30 stage. Each finalist also receives $500, which is really cool. So we received a question about if you have any team members. I think this is in part 1 of the application. You can just put NA or none. You don't have to fill in any other information in that section. So we got a question that asked, can you use the images of a prototype that you made in your visual aid? The answer is yes, definitely. If you built anything, or if you had any props that you might have had with you at your local science fair when you were presenting, you can definitely include an image of what you made, and include that in the visual aid. We don't want to see any pictures of yourself, because again, we want to keep this section anonymous. The judges don't see anything on part 1, like I mentioned before. So we just, if you are including any pictures of things, make sure you yourself are not in them. Okay, we got a great question about the judges. And if they are specific for each project. For example, does a mechanical engineering project get judged by someone with a mechanical engineering background? So yes, so that is why we asked you for your project category in part 2. We want to know, we want to assign evaluators to the right projects. So mechanical, we recruit professionals from all across the nation who are experts in their fields. So if you have a plant science type project, we will get experts in plant sciences to read your papers. Okay, so I think that pretty much wraps us up for today's webinar. Thank you all for joining. I'm sorry for a little bit of audio difficulty and delay that we had at the beginning, but I hope this was helpful for everyone. And if we have not answered any of your questions, definitely let us know. Email us at masters@societyforscience.org, and we will get back to you. We are checking emails pretty frequently from now until the application deadline on June 12th. That actually reminds me, I think there was a question about the application deadline. It is June 12th, not June 13th. So this coming Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Okay, so thanks everyone, and congratulations on making it this far. We hope to see you submit your applications, and good luck.